Ad nauseum, the question of why do you care so much about your white identity has been brought upon us. If not this, why do you care so much about race? Why do you worry about white people so much? So do you worry about your own personal experiences? A simple explanation would be, it is my race, thus I want to preserve what is mine. But this may lack substance. Joel Davis, a famous ideologue and activist within our movement, simply believes that it is a case of racial preservation and defense. In an interview with Jake Shields, he states that other races have their own institutions and organizations that defend their interests, so why shouldn't whites? And this is true, and a completely valid position to hold. However, it lacks anything beyond practical substance, beyond the political. There is no depth of the conversation. Even more so, when the claim isn't substantiated at all and is simply taken as a biological instinct, which despite being true lacks substance beyond the biological, just as Davis's position lacks anything beyond political or practical substance. Thus, the question about the unique identity of white people must take on a deeper stance. Some key works will be taken from the hereditarian camp, works of Michael Levin and Charles Murray, of which Why Race Matters by the former plays a critical role in formulating the uniqueness of white identity. Outside of this camp, the work of Ricardo Duchesne, known as The Uniqueness of European Civilization, plays a philosophical and historical development of the unique identity that white people possess. To open up the official position for clarity, the goal of this essay is to define, articulate, and persuade why white people possess a unique identity beyond any political or instinctual position. With foundations in genetic diversity and actual practical application in world history, using a unique fusionistic methodology, not only to assist in those reading to better inform their own positions of white nationalism, but to better identify a concrete, well-informed, and unique defense of white nationalism by ethicalism and for the general use by the Ethicalist Project and its authors. In the first part, a definition of white and race must be given. Many of our adversaries love to play the semantic game, so it is necessary for those not engaged with the dialectic to the extent that those who can easily give answers to simplistic rebuttals. Furthermore, after defining and articulating what white means, further analysis of biological realities must occur. Since the definition laid out will be dealing with ancestral origins as a primordial origin for the unique identity of whites, so must we analyze biological realities to further flesh out what biologically makes the white race extraordinarily unique. Biology, as the very basis of life, forms the very basis of our argument. But as life progresses past its infancy, so must our argument toward a philosophical and historical account of white uniqueness. To this regard, Ricardo Duchesne's works assist us in tracing the primordial origins of white uniqueness. He further develops a philosophical dialectic to explain its origin, looking at the works of Hegel, Kojève, Nietzsche. Unfortunately, I do not really address this dialectic in retrospect, but that doesn't really matter, seeing as the rest of his work kind of paints the picture as well for some kind of historical account of this white uniqueness. The historical account of the European development from the Indo-European migrations and the tradition of libertarian egalitarian aristocracy, as Chesney puts it, its connection to the Greek miracle, Roman law, medieval feudalism, and Christianization, and the creation of representative republics all help to create a picture of a unique white identity. Lastly, we hope to posit this as a unique fusion between the philosophical and hereditarian circles within the right wing. By combining the two bodies of evidence that seemingly come from different schools of white identitarianism, however, come to the aid of each other in creating a unique conception of white identity. To reiterate, before we begin, definitions to be used as vantage points must be defined clearly against any and all adversaries. Some simple definitions arise from misconceptions. One misconception is the classification of traits. The issue with this is that they do not classify as a race, but serve as indicators. The current indicators of race, Levin argues, do not relate to behaviors and potentials, but don't need to. They serve as an indicator instead of geographic origin. So thus, traits like skin color do not serve as a classifier, but rather the identifier. Adversaries on the left may use the argument that the genetic differences being so small, around 0.000012%, makes the criteria relevant. Levin argues that if the reason the irrelevancy of racial classification is down to genetic difference, then why separate a difference between chimps and humans who share 98.5% of their genetic ancestry? The bottom line is that genetic differences can have a large effect, which can't be used to discount their use. When mapped onto a PCA or a primary component analysis, which is used to show how related human populations are to another, the genetic difference is given more credibility. So once again, it can't be used to discredit anything. However, plotting the shared ancestry onto PCA does reveal a geographic origin between specific populations, namely Europeans. This is what Levin uses to identify principally as white, the classification as ancestrally European. In similarity, to be black is to be ancestrally African. To be Asian is ancestrally Asian. Levin and similar hereditarians may use Caucasoid, Negroid, and Mongoloid in their book, but they have the exact same classification as whites, Asians, or blacks do. A common sense approach to this, according to Levin, is that when someone says European, you immediately assume that they're white. Although not explicitly stated, the same can be reasonably assumed by the reader to have the same result for African to immediately assume as black as well. A well-known environmentalist or leftist idea is that race is a social construct, that race only exists insofar as we value them. The issue with this is that it is self-defeating. Nothing is stopping the leftists from ceasing to believe in race or race relations. Nothing is stopping them from arguing with right-wingers or hereditarians on race. It shows that they don't even take this position seriously themselves. Race, to restate the point, is classified by ancestral origin. If someone is ancestrally European, they are white, etc. Just to derail a bit off topic, good minds should be paid attention to those who use race as a derogatory insult, muddying the waters of this discussion. The jettisoning of the word racist has made it intangible to describe the belief that biological race differences are real. Racism is a Jonas word, often either used as a derogatory insult or as an ad hominem, or used to identify the belief about biological reality. Most likely used as the latter by the reader, obviously, unless you're fucking stupid. For those who use the word to mean the former, Levin asks 4 questions posed to you. Number 1, are race differences in themselves bad? Number 2, is believing in race difference bad? Number 3, is saying there are race differences bad? And number 4, is studying race differences bad? To answer question 1, race differences either exist or they don't. Sometimes reality doesn't align with how we want it to. Thus, simply existing and not having a moral character does not make references to race differences in themselves being bad. Thus, cannot be racist as is taken to be an insult. Believing in the existence of them too, or saying they exist or they don't exist, or even studying race differences cannot be said to be racist. As is simply believing in a reality cannot be good or bad, just as believing the sky is blue is not bad. Believing in a biological reality of race differences too cannot be bad and not racist as is taken to be a derogatory term. Many take the definition that racism is the belief in the racial superiority of one race over the others. However, an issue arises for those who use it insultingly, is that it spares the idea that whites are more intelligent and have more self-control than blacks, and these are not value judgments in themselves, so now it isn't racist to take these things. Due to the political confusion led by this word, racial realism is the correct term to be used, coined by Christopher Brand. In quick summary, racial classifications are identified by ancestral origin, of which traits pertaining to geographic origin can be used to identify members of a race. White people are white, black people are black. It's as simple as that. 2. Genetic arguments using how big the gap is cannot be used to argue the classification irrelevant. Number 3. Racism is a derogatory word. Specifically, it is a Jonas word, with the meaning of the former being lodged as an insult most of the time in arguments by morons. Racial realism is thus used to describe this system of identification. Having established the biological reality of race, the formulation of a unique white identity is now at play. At the very foundation, genetics are being revealed as the environmentalist arguments become unraveled to have a large effect on racial differences. This difference, which will be laid out, shows how at the very biological foundation, it can articulate the idea that the white race has unique characteristics and abilities. In the analysis provided by Michael Levin, by looking at black and white differences in behaviors and intelligence, we could further flesh out the biological character of white uniqueness. The first look into biological research can reveal that white people possess a higher IQ when compared to other races. IQ is a testing metric which measures intelligence through general ability. The hereditarian argument, through the effort of twin studies, broadly speaking, can cover for at most 0.80 of IQ differences, or 0.80% or 80%. Damn, I'm retarded. With more narrow topics discussing anywhere from 0.5 to 0.7 or 50 to 70%, with most conservative estimates concluding a 0.775 difference or a 0.775 or 77.5% difference if my math isn't fucking failing me. Yeah, the differences in IQ between races, specifically between white and black, is demonstrable in numerous correlating convictions, specifically academic and vocational success, law-abidingness, and morality. This would explain biologically how Murray could conclude that 97% of all scientific geniuses are from Europe, and for the arts, the vast majority as well European. Further analyzing this shows the genetic component of this intervention into black learning has failed. Levin concludes. White people in the possession of a high IQ could further assist in the findings that white people possess an IQ strong enough to correlate to a unique characteristic. Now, the analysis further develops when white moral and behavioral norms are demonstrated by Levin. The golden rule of Europeans, as Levin concludes, is a form of negative rights or the freedom from interference. Now, this freedom from interference is personified by the Kantian, which is a qualitative scaling of moral goodness from the vantage point of the European golden rule of negative rights, as a tendency to inhibit oneself from doing something to others that wouldn't want that thing to be done to them. It correlates positively with IQ, and among Caucasoids, or white people, is a favorite trait. Other races, specifically black people, are worse Kantians than whites. On this unique golden rule, they have less empathy, less respect, more impulsiveness, they're more violent and more aggressive, etc. The uniqueness of Kantianism in white people is not through the acknowledgement of this characteristic, but simply through the activism of this characteristic. It's not necessarily that they don't know that they're doing something wrong. They acknowledge it, and they still continue to do it, despite saying they don't wish to do it. In doing so, they continue in what the European Golden Standard considers evil. Thus, their behavior preferences indicate that they are more amoral, meaning they simply don't care. They're not immoral to white standards. It can be said that white people possess a unique characteristic regarding the adaptation of the Golden Rule as well. In further analyzing temperaments of black people can further prove this being that white people possess a unique characteristic insofar as they adapt this golden rule. Black people, when compared to whites, are more aggressive, prone to social disorder, deviancy, possess false self-esteem, are more impulsive, they're prone to spontaneous behavior, more physically violent, have a higher mistrust of authority, watch TV more and movies, they read books less, invest in computers less, they're more sexually active, sexually permissive, have worse money habits, spend money on stupid shit like flashy cars, etc., etc., etc. A lot of these help to prove that they don't adapt the golden rule or the golden standard the same way Europeans do. Now, fortunately, the golden rule, as well, insofar as Levin analyzes it to include his analysis on IQ differences, is limited by its biological reduction and its twofold racial analysis. Specifically, it really only looks at how white people react to the golden rule and how black people react to the golden rule. Levin's book talks heavily on the difference between black and white differences. However, he doesn't pay due diligence to a world perspective. Although, speaking on the African black behavior and intelligence, he doesn't pay dividend to the difference from Asians. The analysis is further limited on the fact that he does admit that Asians test better on IQ tests, or that the golden rule in Asian society is formed from Confucianism or the golden mean in Islam, the Egyptian eloquent peasant story, and how they respond to the golden rule. Despite this, he provides a biological foundation for the historical analysis that will be further used by Duchesne as we continue. This analysis that Duchesne provides will be used to develop the proof for uniqueness of the white race's identity and a small insight to the multiplicative model of genius by Arthur Jensen. Post writing this, I realized I didn't mention Arthur Jensen in the thesis. That was a big mistake. Arthur Jensen is a great source that everyone should check out if they have the time, to further assist in the conclusions provided by Duchesne. Now, as we develop it, the model can be concluded as having its beginning points. Number 1, white intelligence and behavior can be explained genetically. Number 2, intelligence has a high correlation to vocational and educational success, which could explain why white people have produced the most geniuses and most great art has been created by Europeans. Number 3, that white people have a unique golden rule not shared by black people to the same degree. To work off the 3-point model that we've established in the previous paragraphs, the conclusions that the model first receives have a lot of unfinished questions. First off, why does IQ play a role in white uniqueness if Asians fare better on IQ tests? The utility identifying IQ as a part of white uniqueness has its role in Jensen's multiplicative model of geniuses. To briefly summarize this model, Jensen, in researching the elusive characters of geniusness, concludes that geniusness possesses a high level of IQ, trait psychoticism, and high endogenous cortical stimulation. The high levels of IQ can explain itself. Francis Galton, for example, had an IQ of 200. Richard Wagner had a childhood IQ of 140. Both had remarkable achievements in their fields of interest. The two that need more explaining is trait psychoticism and endogenous cortical stimulation. Trait psychoticism is a personality dimension within Hans Eysenck's Big Three model. What a fucking goofy name, dude. Characterized by impulsivity, aggression, antisocial behavior, and a tendency towards unconventional beliefs and experiences. Now, I know some of these sound familiar or similar to the black behavioral traits portrayed in the previous pieces of evidence. However, blacks lack the first part of this model, deducting them from the standard. It could also explain, despite them displaying higher levels of trait psychotic traits in behavioral studies, they have not produced the levels of geniusness that white people have. Endogenous cortical stimulation has revealed that high levels of SUL and endogenous production have been shown in studies cited by Jensen to have a correlation to productivity in professors and overachievers. Combine this with trait psychoticism and high IQ, and you have the underpinnings of geniusness, as Jensen puts it. How can these be contextualized in a race? Because, to Jensen's credibility, he doesn't really talk about race within this multiplicative model. The first part obviously disqualifies black people, and the second would disqualify Asian people. The latter disqualification needs more attention. This is where we can turn to Ricardo Duchesne's works, The Uniqueness of Western Civilization. The purpose of the book served to find the origins for the restlessness of the Western soul, from which he traced back to the Indo-Europeans. But how it would serve us is in our model, is the findings he's discovered in the pursuit of his own conclusions, particularly with trait psychoticism. It could be enough to recite that Murray concludes 97% of scientific geniuses are from Europe, most of the arts vastly European, but it seems unsatisfactory. Perhaps an analysis into the historical civilizations of Duchesne researches could provide us a better answer to why whites possess higher levels of trait psychoticism. In analyzing a sharp difference in self-aggrandizing chiefdoms within early European civilizations and the chiefdoms of the Near East and later in the Asian feudal societies, we can see that in the European self-aggrandizing chiefdoms, a clear fight for dominance was at play. The Jews would often perform self-aggrandizement through the tradition of feasting, which brought more and more people under their control, which formed an aristocracy. A key detail to pay attention to here is the seeming obsession that they had with self-image and worth, who expressed themselves individually through martial power, wealth, and the aforementioned tradition of feasting. The Indo-Aryan chiefdoms, which came from the same migration as the Indo-Europeans, took on an agro-bureaucratic character, quote-unquote. As centralized social control became the order. Tribal assemblies in the Indo-Aryan chiefdoms were replaced by one centered on a king. Similarly, the Indo-Iranian pastoralists soon fell into orbit of the Indo-Aryan tradition of agro-bureaucracy, and a form of despotic rule took place there as well. While the self-aggrandizement of the kings and the eastern chieftains may indicate some form of psychotic traits, most of the economy did not pursue self-aggrandizement in a psychotic way as the Western aristocratic chieftains did, as Duchesne concludes. The group-oriented East relied on tributary incomes to the chiefs to fund public works and infrastructures. The Eastern economies relied on irrigation, agriculture, hydraulic-based economics. The means of war for the West was dominance and prestige. The East was often for self-protection. In the end, trait psychoticism did not develop in the same regard as it did in white civilization. Self-aggrandizing aristocrats spent their fortunes on their accessions, such as an economy geared toward war, prestige, and self-achievement. The Eastern primordial origins did not, and geared themselves toward a tributary funding of public work and infrastructures aforementioned mentioned. These primordial origins play a vital role in the development of both races, as a continuation of both models persisted to the modern day, with a liberal West and a state-oriented East observable to this day. The servility of these institutions are also to be observed. A part of trait psychoticism is a lack of conformity, which Asian civilizations do not seem to possess to the same level as white civilization. This can be observed through Duchesne's use of Kuchert's works on Eastern civilization, such as the Epic Gilgamesh or the Hammurabi Code, which show the absolute power and servility being paid to the king. The pharaoh in Egypt, for example, was seen as the ultimate source of power by which most Asians paid their servile dues, showing a lack of psychotic traits affirmatively used to describe European civilizations, for example. The multiplicative model thus justifies some of the biological explanation for uniqueness of white people. Since black people do not possess high general ability, they do not produce as many geniuses, since Asians don't share the same levels of trait psychoticism as observable by their primordial origins in Nutrition's work. Thus, they don't produce the same amount of geniuses as white people do. The last trait is to be omitted, precisely because I have not really found any study regarding SUL levels between the three races listed throughout this work. If anyone could show me, yeah, that'd be really cool. But I doubt anyone's that autistic to like look that or work that shit out. You know what I mean? Regardless, black and Asians lack in two fundamental traits according to Genesis' multiplicative model, either through studies in intelligence and behavioral studies or in historical research and primordial origin study. The last fundamental position that Levin's work about the golden principle begs the question: how does this make white people unique when Asians have adopted a similar golden principle in nearly all Eastern religions and philosophies? These Eastern religious and philosophical positions no doubt play a significant role and influence in Asian society even today, so this could exclude the utility of the golden rule and explain the uniqueness of white people. At face value, this does seem to be the case. However, once we've analyzed the aforementioned civilizational applications of this golden rule, the uniqueness when white people have to this rule is observed. Take the case of the European aristocratic chiefdoms and the autocratic chiefdoms of the Near East. However it may be spun, the aristocratic chiefdoms of Europe displayed a self-respect for the individualism and character of each aristocracy. In many ways, Duchesne observes, the chief was first among equals. An egalitarian nature is observed in this regard. A respect for the negative rights of the aristocrats in any chiefdom is thus upheld. When compared to the Asian civilizations, despite the golden rule being made a standard in nearly all Eastern religions, held an autocratic government, thus violating the negative rights of the nobility in every regard because they were treated as servile to the king. How white people are unique in this regard to the golden rule is not that they have a golden rule per se, but it is how they have applied it throughout their historical development. Even in the conclusions found in comparing Western feudalism and the vassalage relationship between kings and nobles, there was still a reciprocal respect of the negative rights of the nobility by the king. Oftentimes, the feudal relationship in Eastern civilization were that of the king appointing a given person to control over land, with the controller of any given land owing full servitude to the king, with no ties of an egalitarian aristocracy to back up the relationship. The characters of which kings' roles were dictated so included the rights and privileges of this vassalage. The king was, just like the chiefs, first among equals. It's no wonder why this would make a sensible transition to parliamentary roles. Coupled with the first Western legal system owing to the Roman legal system, different realms of life were given autonomy and broken into their own respective corporations, which also, coupled with an increased privilege granted to commercialization, which gave bigger roles to commercial trades, created the Western system as we know it today, of which negative rights and the golden rule still applies and still hold their high levels of application, which, when you compare it to Eastern civilizations, isn't the case. They still hold this very autocratic, bureaucratic, and even despotic, to some accounts, rule over their civilizations. Wow, okay. It thus can be concluded from this, our three-point model has fully developed to its ending point. Number one, why intelligence and behavior can be explained genetically and can be observed throughout historical application. Number two, intelligence has a high correlation to vocational and educational success, with Jensen's multiplicative model of geniuses providing a qualified uniqueness to white intelligence, particularly a combination of general ability, creativity, and productivity, outlines the first two could explain why black and Asian people do not possess the same kind of intelligence that white people have, thus the high IQ of whites possessing a unique characteristic in and of its own. Lastly, number three, that the golden rule of white people has a successful historical application and has remained in its development to this day. Despite the seemingly universal application of the golden rule to Asian civilization, the despotic nature of its development near and far east seem to have not applied this golden rule as honestly as white people have. With this model, ethicalism hopes to have provided a unique identity for white people that transcends a political and instinctual nature toward a biological and historical model. As it was stated in the thesis, this work was not only to insist in those to better inform their own positions of white nationalism, but to better identify a concrete, well-informed, and unique defense of white nationalism by the Ethicalism Project and for the general use by the Ethicalism Project and its authors. It used the works of Jensen, Levin, and Duchesne, of which all will be linked in the description of this video. Please check these works out. They provide a lot of the background used for this persuasive essay. So that was the first essay by Ethicalism. This is just like a post editing, post sound or whatever, post voiceover, post whatever the fuck. Ethicalism has more work to come. We plan on releasing a YouTube like intro to show kind of the ideas that me and Bloodhail are like exploring, to give some kind of idea of where we want to take this. You know, it's up to you if you want to stay. I want you to stay. You know, fuck yeah. But at the same time, it's like, you know, you could stay stupid. You know, it's up to you. This is the future. This is the fucking future, baby. But yeah, jokes aside, thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Share this video with your fellow chuds. This video is a truth nuke. You know, fucking, yeah. All right, bye.